Schock, a Republican representative from Illinois, a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, good morning to you.
Good morning, Carl.
You heard John reference, or actually Van Hollen reference that language, the complete and timely payment of obligations until May 19th. A good idea or not?
Well, Mr. Van Hollen is trying to have it both ways. Here's the guy that's the ranking member of the Budget Committee. He was the chairman of the Budget Committee when Democrats controlled the House, and guess what? They didn't pass a budget. So now Democrats are acting like, oh, this is no big deal. Senate Democrats are saying, oh, sure, we'll pass a budget. Why haven't they in the last 4 years? It's because they don't want the American people to see how much taxes they want to increase in order to balance the budget, and the fact that they're not willing to make changes to Medicare and Social Security to save them. The problem for us in the House, honestly, Carl, is that we've been negotiating with ourselves. We've put out budgets and we've passed them. We've talked about entitlement reform. We've talked about tax reform. But nobody else is talking with us. The Senate's been completely silenced. The President's gotten away with just criticizing what the House has put forward. And so what we've simply said is, based on our constituent feedback, which is, why is the Senate getting away with not passing a budget, even though there's a law, the 1974 Budget Act, that requires Congress by law to pass a budget? What's the enforcement of that? Well, there's going to be enforcement after today, and the enforcement is you're not going to get paid like most of the American people do when you don't do your job.
Right. Salaries would go into escrow until the chamber does pass a budget. Questions about constitutionality about that, though. What do you make of them?
Well, look, we wouldn't be passing it if we didn't think it was constitutional. And the fact of the matter is, if the House of Representatives passes this with a majority, instructing the Treasury to withhold our pay if we don't pass a budget, we believe that's constitutional, as does the Senate. If you vote with the majority vote, you can withhold our pay. Look, what are we talking about if we hit the debt limit? We're not going to pay military personnel. We're not going to pay all these other things we're contractually obligated to do. The same thing with our own pay. If we can't start with ourselves, then how can we threaten anyone else's pay?
People are making a big deal, Congressman, over this retreat from insisting on one-to-one spending cuts versus revenue. Now we have the debt ceiling till May. I wonder if you feel the GOP is in retreat, and if you disagree with that retreat.
Well, first of all, you wouldn't get, assuming that we can pass this today, that assumes we get 218 Republicans to vote yes. You wouldn't have our most arch-conservative members, Chairman Paul Ryan of our Budget Committee, Eric Cantor, John Bader, you wouldn't have them singing out of the same hymnal if we were retreating. We have never been more unified behind a position than we are now. I feel pretty confident that we're going to pass this today. So what this really is moving away from playing small ball, cutting $100 billion here, $100 billion there. We're running multi-trillion-dollar deficits. We've gone from $10 trillion in debt to $16 trillion in debt in the first 4 years of this presidency, and we now recognize we got to save this president from himself, and we're not going to do it by nickel and diamond every 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. We got to lay out the vision for America that we have. How do we save ourselves from a debt crisis, and force the Senate to put forward their view of how we save ourselves from a debt crisis. Let the Senate lay out its tax proposals. Let the Senate lay out its entitlement reforms if they have them, and then we can have an adult conversation once the Senate passes its budget and the House passes its budget.
Right, but you say if they have them. What makes you think that there is any more fertile ground for reform this week or next week than there was at the end of last year?
Well, Carl, I agree with you. I agree with you that the Senate hasn't had those ideas, which is why we're calling the Senate's bluff today by saying pass a budget or don't get paid. And you see that Senator Murray, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, is saying, oh, trust us, we're going to pass a budget. Chuck Schumer this weekend on the Sunday morning show says, oh, sure, trust us, we're going to pass a budget. They haven't passed a budget in the last 4 years. So this bill today, moving out of the House, will force the Senate to act, which is something they have not done in the past 4 years.
Right. Finally, Congressman, for the most conservative Republicans who say even a 3-month extension to May 19th is wrong, are you trying to back them off of that ledge and say we need to speak with a unified voice and at least get this done, even if it is a short term?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the reason why Jim Jordan, the former chairman of the RSC, Steve Scalise, the current chairman of the RSC, that's the Republican Study Committee, that's the most conservative members of the Republican chamber, they've all endorsed this because they realize that if you really want to fix the debt, if you really want to cut spending, you've got to do big things. It can't just be little cuts here and there. And so they agree with the strategy here, which is really to move beyond the debt limit discussion right that we're having and get to the budget discussion, which is really where you make the big fundamental changes. Think about a lot of your viewers today are business guys. How do you make structural changes in your business? It's through your long-term planning. It's through your budget. Playing this small ball month to month is not a good strategy for us to get the Senate to act, to get the president to finally negotiate with us on those big ticket items.
Congressman Schock, good to have you. I imagine we'll be speaking a lot over the next few months. Thanks for your time.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Carl.
Aaron Schock of Illinois. Straight ahead.